Hiya, everyone, and welcome to Out of Nowhere. My special guest today is Greg Little. Greg, where are we now? Greg is the author and co author of more than 70 books and workbooks. He has been featured in 14 documentaries on the History Channel, History 2, Discovery, National Geographic, Sci Fi, MSNBC, the Weather Channel, along with his wife Laura, for over 10 years. He was involved in the search for Edgar Case's Atlantic in the Bahamas. He is the author of an illustrated encyclopedia of Native American Indian molds, Earthworks, and has several other books on molds. Can we please welcome Greg to the show? Hello there.
Hi, Bob, and thank you. And I'll show this real quick. This is the encyclopedia that he mentioned. Back up here a little to see it. It's a rather large, oversized hardcover. That one's out of print. That was the second edition. Third edition's coming out in 6 to 8 weeks from now. But that's not, I don't think that's what we're going to talk about much today, although we may talk a bit about mounds because the Denisovans or Denisovans may lead to the Mounds. That's another story. Maybe we'll get there. But it's good to be here. It's been 2 years. We talked about that before the show started, and it just feels almost like yesterday.
It does. It does.
Yeah.
For the listeners who may only vaguely know the term, who were the Denisovans and how were they first identified?
Okay, so they got their name from where they were found. It's a site in Siberian Russia. And Denisovan or Denisovan means the cave of Denis. And that's how they got their name. So initially it was a finger, a bit of a finger, and a couple other small bones that were found. They were analyzed genetically and found to be a different species of humanity that was actually earlier than the Neanderthals. We know that they interbred with the Neanderthals now, and we know that they interbred with modern humans, and a lot of us carry a little bit of Denisovan DNA. I'm going to just go ahead and call them Denisovans. That's how most Americans pronounce it. So when they were discovered, it was really odd and unusual. And their DNA, they found a tooth, and it was a very large tooth. And so speculation came up immediately that they were giants or very large people. They have since been found in 5 or 6 places, and all the DNA remains the same. That is, they can identify them by doing DNA analysis. They've been found from Asia. They've also been found in parts of Europe, not very many. I mean, we're talking about very little, and extreme, almost the South Pacific part of Asia. So we know that they moved around quite a bit. But they're an extinct branch of humanity before the Neanderthals, but most of us carry some Neanderthal DNA and some Denisovan DNA. Native Americans, for example, carry a fairly large amount of Denisovan DNA in them.
All right. Do you believe Denisovans were physically different enough from Homo sapiens to match ancient descriptions of giants and unusual beings?
I think they probably were large. And when I say large, we're talking about a race of people that are more than 6 feet tall, some of them more than 7 feet tall. There may have been some that are 8 feet tall. There is evidence that we know there are people that get to 7 feet tall today, almost 8. There was a guy in the United States called Wadlow who got to 8 feet 11 inches. Now that is that's big. He died in the 1950s, I believe. But there have been people that tall. They usually have some sort of a genetic disorder, agromegalia. There's another disorder that can call it gigantism. But not all people that get to 7 feet, 7'5", 7'7", they don't all have gigantism.
No.
Uh, so it tells us that it is in human DNA. Of course, human DNA has a lot more DNA from the ancient past. But yes, I think the large tooth that has been found does point to the Denisovans being larger than modern humans are today. I will say this, if you actually look up research that has correlated tooth size to body size, you will find a positive correlation. The larger the teeth, the larger the person. It's not a one-to-one correlation. There are almost no one-to-one correlations that exist, but it is a statistically significant one. So that's probably the best evidence we have, since we haven't found an intact Denisovan skeleton. They've only found bones, various portions of bones. But yeah, I think they were somewhat larger, and they may well match old mythology and legends about giants. Sure.
It's funny you're saying that. A friend of Paul's is 7'2", and I met up with him quite a while ago. And because I'm quite small, it looked a giant to me at
Yes,
7'2".
it
God,
it
I was
yeah,
looking at him and I thought, how tall is he?
yeah. Well, I stood next to, when I was in high school, I stood next to Wilt Chamberlain. You may not know who he is, American basketball player. He was 7'2", but he was proportional. He was very muscular. And when I was in high school, I stood right next to him and all the other basketball players. I played basketball at the time. I'm 5'10". Well, right now I'm 5'9 3/4", but I was 5'10" then.
Yeah.
And yeah, they seem like giants. A 7-footer seems like a giant to a person that's 5'5", 5'6", 5'7". And the same thing occurred when the Spanish came into North America in the 1500s. We're talking about 1508 to roughly 1539, 1540 is when the Spanish went through. They met up with some people, Native American people. They literally called them giants in their chronicles. And the chronicles were almost always written by priests, not always, but usually by priests. And they simply called the Native Americans they interacted with giants. They did give a description of their size, how much taller they were than their leaders and some others. And what's been generated from that is the tallest Native Americans that were seen were about 7'5", 7'6" in height. The
All right.
same thing is true in South America with the Ona tribe and the Taluchi tribe, all the way down at Tierra del Fuego. They were seen as giants also, by not just by the Spanish, though, but also by the English. Several English captains went and even measured some of them. And they tried to take one back, and he died on the way over, and they tossed his body overboard. But there are lots of reports of giants, particularly in the Americas. And when I say giants, we're talking about people that are 7 feet, 7'6", maybe some of them were 8, but they're definitely taller than the European explorers that saw them.
Garobe Tepe has been called the world's oldest known temple complex. What about the site that most challenged conventional timelines of civilization?
Well, okay, Göbekli Tepe. There's Karahan Tepe. I think there's 50 sites over there now, 20 or 30 large ones. They are challenging the transition from hunter gatherers, which is basically a way of subsistence. It's how people got their food, hunting and gathering. But typically, hunter gatherers transition to the next level of culture through agriculture. They plant and they become more stable in an area. They build larger structures. And Göbekli Tepe occurred at a time, we're talking about 9,000 BC. So 11,000 years ago, it occurred at a time when we don't really know of any agricultural societies. They were gathering uh, food, obviously, but they weren't planning a lot. And so the main thing that's happened is that hunter-gatherer culture definitions are altering a bit. The idea that hunter-gatherers didn't build these large stone structures with animal carvings in them, beautifully made, intricate carvings of animals within the T-shaped structures at Göbekli Tepe and at all the other sites, Kastepler sites in Turkey. These are all in southern Turkey or
Mm.
southeastern Turkey. Um, it's challenging what we've been told through mainly archaeology. I don't know how much further back it's going to go. I can say that at the same time that Göbekli Tepe in Europe was, or yeah, well, Asia was being built. Here in the Americas, there were some mounds being built, which nobody has ever thought that that took place that early either. There's a mound in Louisiana, for example, that dates to 9000 BC. And again, hunter gatherers. There are mounds in South America, in Brazil, that date to about 8400 BC.
Oh my
So
God.
there were things going on here too. And I suspect this kind of thing was going on elsewhere, but it's so old, and most of the structures that were built were fragile. It's like the structures that we build today are generally pretty fragile. Most houses in the United States are made from wood,
Mm.
maybe bricks. They're not made to last thousands of years. They may last hundreds of years, but eventually they deteriorate, they're overgrown, and you really can't see them anymore. And the big difference here is Göbekli Tepe was one of the very first places that had large stone structures dated to that old, to 9000 BC. And it's actually astonishing. It was astonishing when it was found. Malta has similar structures. Those are only dated to 3 to 5000 BC. So we're talking about something that goes way back in time. You have the idea of a lost culture or lost civilization that was destroyed around 10,000 BC. That's been around a while. Graham Hancock, that's one of his ideas. There are several other people that have the same idea that there was a culture before the hunter gatherers. It was destroyed. And then areas like where Göbekli Tepe is in in extreme southern North America and then in South America, they survived whatever happened around 10,000 BC. And they built a few structures that still exist today. But it's changed a lot. It seems to me archaeology is kind of saying, oh, it's no big deal and we're not changing anything. But consider this: Göbekli Tepe, which has these giant circular stone structures with huge T-shaped pillars with beautiful animal carvings on them. That was made about 6,000 years before any of the pyramids were built in Egypt. So that changes things rather dramatically
Of course it
to
does,
me.
yeah.
Yeah.
Do you see Göbekli Tepe as the evidence of lost civilization, as a proof that our understanding of primitive hunter-gatherers is simply flawed?
I think that some of what we believe about hunter gatherers is true, but Göbekli Tepe and even some of the sites in the United States, they don't match the narrative that we've been given for a long, long time. Now, archaeology does adapt and change and bring in new ideas as new evidence is found. This one, I think, is causing problems for them. Because if they accept that Göbekli Tepe is a game changer, it means whatever happened before Göbekli Tepe is not exactly what we've been told. These people were not all nomadic. They did settle down in places for long periods of time, and they may have had agriculture long before we believe they did. I think that's the main thing. I think they had agriculture before then. It wasn't the same agriculture that we have now, or even in, say, 2000 or 3000 BC, but it has changed things. Um, I think over time, archaeology will incorporate this. They don't really want to change much because they are dead set in saying there was no civilization before 9000 BC. And they often say, well, we don't talk about civilizations anymore. Um, and to me, a civilization is basically organized society. It's an organized communal society that is beyond little bands or groups of people that are familial groups. So there's something much more organized going on with society at the time, and it looks like a civilization. So that's what Göbekli Tepe is pointing to. It meets all of the criteria of what I'm calling a civilization. So yeah, it's a game changer.
How do you respond to archaeologists who say there is no evidence linking Denisovans to Göbekli Tepe?
Well, I don't know. The Denisovans were in that area. I don't know of any skeletal remains or bones or DNA that has been recovered that is Denisovan from Göbekli Tepe. The Denisovans supposedly died out around 50,000 BC, and that was in areas of the near the South Pacific, all the way there in Asia. They supposedly died out in most areas around 100,000 to 200,000 BC. And then their remnants were supposedly the Neanderthals. What Andrew and I suspect is that the Denisovans did start in Asia and they started moving to the west. And they kept moving west. They incorporated themselves into the peoples that they found along the way. When they got eventually to near the Atlantic Ocean, and let's say that it was in Spain, Portugal, and France, they started their descendants. By this time, the Denisovans themselves, pure Denisovans, were gone. But they had interbred with the humans, and the humans carried some Denisovan DNA. And we believe that they very well may have been the Solutrean culture. The Solutreans made stone points that were quite long, very, very long, very thin, and they had what's called fluted sides. And the flutes were where you chip away big parts and it creates like a channel on both sides of a point, of a stone point. That makes them more fragile, but it makes them more deadly for hunting big game. So the Solutreans made those. The Solutreans, it's believed, disappeared in France and Spain and Portugal around 16,000 BC. However, Solutrean DNA has been found in people like in the Orkney Islands. My wife and I went to Orkney really to look into some of this. About a year and a half ago, we went to Orkney. And also in Scandinavia, some has been found. And of course, it's in Native American DNA. But around, people will say that the Clovis culture started in America. And when I say America, I mean the United States, around 10,000, 11,000 BC. Well, that's not really true because the oldest Clovis points, which look essentially identical to the Solutrean points in the Iberian Peninsula area, the earliest points are from the Chesapeake Bay area, and they date to about 15,000 BC. So we believe that the Solutrean descendants went to like Scandinavia, Orkney Island, which is, North Scotland, and then they hopped to Scandinavia, came across from Iceland and Greenland, and made it to the shores of North America, and they became the Clovis culture. They brought the Clovis kit, the toolkit. It spread very rapidly, and those people, we think, may well have become the leaders of what is called the Adena mound builders. The Adenas built very, very large burial tombs made out of stone chambers and log chambers. They look identical to the things you find in the UK. And in Ireland has them. There's some found, a lot of them found in Scotland.
Yeah.
But the Adena mounds look identical in the interior. So that's what we think, that these Solutrean descendants wound up bringing Clovis over here and became the leaders of the Adena culture. And Native American lore says that the tribes rose up against them and killed them. That's another long and detailed story.
Many 19th century newspapers report and describe giant skeletons discovered. How do you evaluate which reports are credible and which might be exaggeration?
Well, the only way to do it, Andrew and I worked on that in a book, and it was back in 2013. The book came out in 2014. It's called the Path of Souls. So right now, there's approximately 1,500 newspaper articles from the United States that were in the 1800s and early 1900s, up to about 1940 or so, that claimed that giant skeletons were found in mounds. Again, there's like 1,500 of these. Some of them are the same article that's been recycled over and over. But out of those 1,000 reports, there's close to, or 1,500, there's close to 1,000 reports of them all together of different places. So how you evaluate those is something that we did with some of them. And that is, you take the report and then you have to run it backwards and go all the way to the original source. It takes a lot of time. We did that with several. Some of these reports in newspapers were totally accurate. For example, there's a couple of reports that were in the New York Times. There were very brief reports, but they talked about skeletons pulled out of mounds that were 7 feet, 7.5 feet tall. And those reports are validated by the Smithsonian excavation reports. Those were published in the 1800s over a period of about 7 or 8 years, and then there were some additional ones published. However, in looking at these, Andrew and I hit a lot of dead ends. There was one in a county in Pennsylvania where my grandmother was born. And I started looking into that. And the newspaper said basically that there was a group of men digging a cellar in Bradford County, Pennsylvania. And while they were digging the cellar, they came upon two skeletons. One was 10 feet long and the other one was 18 feet long.
Oh, my God.
So we started digging into that. We found the original report, which is in a huge book published in the 1800s called A History of Bradford County. And in it, what it basically said, this is it, it said, two men digging a cellar reported to the sheriff that they found these two skeletons. The sheriff came and looked at it, and that was it. That is the absolute total of the entire thing. So that's like a dead end.
Yeah.
I'll give you another example. We looked at one in Weeden Island in Florida, and there's loads of these, and it talked about all these giant skeletons, and some of them sent to the Smithsonian. And the Smithsonian did, in fact, send a excavation team to Weeden Island in Florida. This was in the 1900s, and they found there were burial mounds there, and they found a lot of skeletal remains, and they were all normal size. And what they found is it was a hoax. The giant ones was a hoax, and a guy actually planted some bones in one of the mounds and then brought the newspaper reporters in, and he was selling land. He was selling land for houses on the island, and he was telling people, you know, you get to keep the mounds that are on your land, and there may be giants in them. And so he called the newspaper out, and they dug up this one bone, which he said was a giant bone. There are others that are simply, another example, Beloit College in Wisconsin. There's about 4 articles that talk about 20 or so skeletons pulled out of the mounds at Beloit College. Some of the mounds still exist there. And they say the original reports talked about all these giants, but they didn't. I got the original reports. I talked to the people at Beloit College, and somebody took their original reports. Yes, they excavated skeletons. They had the sizes in their reports. They were all normal size. Somebody just decided to say that they were giants. So that's where it is. Some of these reports are genuine. The tallest person that we have ever validated that is in one of the archaeological reports, it's also in newspaper articles, that skeleton was 7 feet 6 inches long. And there's around 17 validated reports from the Smithsonian. There's another 10 or so from other archaeological reports, and those are the ones that we accept. So, yeah, there were a lot of people that were 7 feet tall in ancient America.
Now,
Exactly. Yeah.
why did they try and hide the bones then? Or the bones just seemed to disappear? You went
Well,
to
I can tell
dead
you.
end.
Yeah. Okay. So, first of all, when the Smithsonian was digging, when they started, they called it the Mound Survey Project. And it started in I want to say it was 1880, 87 or 88. It ran for 7 years. The Smithsonian did not want to do this, but they were forced by the U.S. Congress to do it. And their stated goal was to find out who built the mounds. And when they started digging into mounds, which the total they dug into during those 7 years is somewhere around 2,500 mounds. That's how many they dug into.
Right.
During that time period, there was another guy, an individual named Clarence Bloomfield Moore, who dug into 3,000 mounds at the same time the Smithsonian was doing theirs. So the Smithsonian, if you actually look at what they did not want to get skeletal remains. What they wanted were the skulls. They wanted the biggest and best skulls they could find so they could put them on display. And to ship the entire skeleton was way too difficult at the time. They just wanted the pottery. They wanted pipes that were found, any effigies that were found, anything like that, beads. They wanted copper ornaments and skulls. However, when they started going into some of these tombs, like I told you a little while ago, a lot of these tombs are extremely well made. So they have stacked stone sides. They often have either large slabs of stone on the top for the
Oh,
roofs, or sometimes they have giant logs going across that have stone. And then the whole thing is covered by earth. And the earth could be 30 or 40 feet deep before you get to the tombs. So the
yeah.
tombs were airtight. That's the point I'm getting to. They never got wet, they were airtight. And what they found when they opened these up, they get rid of all the dirt, they'd take the roof off, they'd see the skeletal remains there, they'd see pottery and other artifacts there. And they said almost as soon as the skeletal remains were exposed to the air, they became like a mush and dust,
All
and
right.
they literally fell apart. Sometimes they would pick them up and it would just fall apart. That's what happened over, and that's in report after report
From
after report. I know some people don't believe that. However, in some cases, the excavators did, in fact, box up skeletal remains and ship them to the Smithsonian. And that's in the reports that, I did this, I shipped them to the Smithsonian, and the Smithsonian can't find them. Of course, they've gotten rid of almost everything that they have now because of our NAGPRA law. NAGPRA stands for Native American Grave Protection and Repatriation Act, which means they can't, that they have their own law. NAGPRA doesn't apply to the Smithsonian, but it applies to everybody else. They need to repatriate them, send them back to the tribes. So they did get some. They have repatriated almost all of them. So they're all reburied or back in the hands of Native American tribes and then cannot be looked at, tested, measured, or anything. That's where we're at today.
Right, right. I know Rebecca's just wanting to ask a question about Atlantis.
Okay.
We'll do that.
All
Hi,
right.
Greg. Could you tell us a bit about your
Ah,
research in Bahamas, Atlantis?
okay. Well, it's not something I wanted to do. It was actually something that Andrew Collins uh, got me into. So back in the year 2000, it was actually before this, my wife and I were doing a newsletter for the ARE, which stands for the Association of Research and Enlightenment, which is the official Edgar Cayce organization.
Right.
So, okay, so we were also speaking at an annual conference called Ancient Mysteries. It's the premier conference that the ARE put on every year at their headquarters in Virginia Beach. And I was lining up some speakers. I never talked about Atlantis. I always talked about Native American mounds and archaeology in South America. Then I invited Andrew over, and it's the first time I met him. And I wanted Andrew to talk about his book From the Ashes of Angels and his book Gateway to Atlantis. So while Andrew was presenting his book Gateway to Atlantis, he showed two photographs that I had seen before but never really thought much about. And the two
Right.
photographs were both black and white. They were taken in 1968 and they were taken in the Bahamas. One of them showed uh, what looked like the letter E, the cursive letter E, A, B, C, D, E. And it was underwater. You could look down from a plane and it looked like a great big E. And no one had ever been able to find it. And that was always a mystery. It's in Charles Berlitz's books in the 1970s. The other one was taken by a pilot who was flying a Constellation at the time, and he was flying at 500 feet to keep out of Cuban airspace. And they looked down and they saw what looked like a triple ring of standing stones in the water off of Andros Island. That's what they saw. And he had a Brownie camera. They flew really slow, opened up the window by the pilot. He stuck his head out, took a photo of this thing. And Andrew showed that photo. So what you see in the photo is what looks like a triple ring of standing stones laying in shallow water with the stones sticking up. And of course, as Andrew said in that, no one has ever found this. Is it real? It would make, it's a really big deal. And I remember standing in the back watching Andrew, turning to my wife, and then just spontaneously saying, I'll bet we can find that. I'll bet we can go there and find both of them and solve that mystery. That's how it started. So what we did a couple months later, I started taking scuba diving lessons, became a certified scuba diver.
Oh my God.
I was a pilot I had a private pilot license at the time, but I knew I couldn't fly this. We chartered a 2-engine high-wing Norman Islander and a pilot. I talked to a lot of people who told me where they thought it was. They were all wrong. I asked them, well, have you ever talked to the people who actually took the photo? And they said, no, we don't even know if they're alive. I found the pilot who took the photo. He lived in Florida. My wife and I got in touch with him. We went down and we interviewed him. And I said, so where are these? I said, people have said they're inland, they're on the other side. People had spent a fortune looking for these. And he said, here, I'll show you. And he went in his house, he pulled out a pilot's map, took a pin, put the pin on, and he said, it's right about here. And the other one's up here somewhere. So the E was in North Andros. The triple ring was in extreme southern Andros, which was in Cuban airspace, by the way. And I said, has anybody ever asked you where it was? And he said, no. He said, I've been around people who showed it and said nobody can find it. So I found a pilot, a commercial plane, like I said, who was more than willing to fly low in Cuban airspace. And we spent 5 hours flying up and down Andros Island, and we found it. We also found the E-shaped form. We found a sponge diver and a small boat about the size of a rowboat. It's the only thing that could get over there. I will tell you, it's very, very dangerous. You see no boats, you see no planes, there's nobody living over there. There's no cell phone coverage. You can't get on cell phone, and satellite phones are blocked. You can't use a satellite phone down there. So if you break down, you're on your own. So we went to the circle first, the triple ring of standing stones. It wasn't a triple ring of standing stones. It was actually a triple ring of sponge. Giant, giant sponge. I'm talking about huge sponge that had never been harvested. It was astonishing. The sponge diver was just freaking out. He said he'd never seen anything like it. And it's a natural formation. We found the exact explanation in a Bahamas marine biology book. So that was the end of that one. 2 weeks later, we flew back down there and went to the E-shaped thing, and it was a weird coral reef that had turtle grass growing in it that simply made that shape. That's all it was. We then went to our hotel. We were going to fly out the next morning. This is how it really happened. I was done with it. That's all we were going to do. And then we didn't want to go to Bimini. We didn't want to look at Bimini Road. I didn't care about investigating anything else. And that night, about 10 o'clock, there was a knock at our door at the hotel. And by then, word had circulated that these weird people from America are looking around, looking at this stuff. They've rented boats. They've talked to a lot of people. We were giving people money to give us the information that we wanted. And this guy told us that he said there was a formation that is bigger than the Bimini Road, looks a lot like, or the Bimini Wall, that it was off Andros, and it was no more than a quarter mile away from where we were staying, the motel we were staying at on Andros Island. So the next morning, before our charter plane came to pick us up, we took our gear, we walked up to this place. I snorkeled out a couple 100 yards into the ocean, couldn't find it. We walked to a different place, snorkeled out about 500 yards into the ocean, which actually is stupid, but I did it. And there it was. There was this unbelievable, weird stone formation, J-shaped, three layers, big square rectangular blocks there. I got one photo of it. At the time, we were using cheap underwater cameras, throwaways. I got one good photo of it. When we got home, of course, we had to develop the photos. And I sent that picture to a few marine geologists. I sent them also to some people who'd done work at Bimini. And they said, well, that looks like the Bimini Road, but the stones are bigger. And so that's how we started. And we decided we're going to go back to this thing. We went back to it, and then we decided we have to see the Bimini Road. Then I got in touch with the original archaeologists and geologists who had worked at the Bimini Road and said that it's all natural and that it's nothing. I got involved with the original geologist that tried to debunk it all and found out a lot of strange things about him. And realized that the Bimini Road and Bimini Wall is not just a natural formation. We then found stone anchors everywhere, and over a 10-year period.
Do you think it was man-made then?
Yes, it was man-made. There's no doubt about it. I mean, to me, there's no doubt about it. The research that is cited over and over is fraudulent. The guy who did the research worked for the U.S. Geological Survey. He made fake archaeological objects at the U.S. Geological Survey offices. Everybody knew about it. University geologists knew about it. He then took these fake objects to the Bahamas and planted them under and around the Bimini Road. Now, today, that would be a felony if you did that.
Of course it would, yeah.
This is he did this in the very early 1970s. He also has represented the research. He said all of the cores. He did some coring into the Bimini, the Bimini Road. It's not a road, it's actually a breakwater, and it's multiple layers of stones. It's not just stones laying on the bottom, is what they say, but it's because the sand is covering the stones under the ones on the surface. And you can see it elsewhere. There are prop stones under there. It's very clear that it's man-made. But this guy, these geologists who came out and said, "Oh, it's all, it's natural." Their research is fraudulent. It has been reported fraudulently, and they virtually lied. Lied. They lied. And one of them's still alive, and I've told him repeatedly, if I am defaming you, sue me. Let's go to court on it. And so they're just kind of quiet about it, because once you dig in and you get their actual reports, which they don't give to anybody, the actual so-called scientific reports they wrote, it's clear. It's not what they say. It's not a natural formation.
So they wanted to find out about the Atlantis and said it was real.
They believe that there is no such thing for their own reasons. I don't think it's scientific reasons. Atlantis is like that lost civilization, which, by the way, Edgar Cayce talks about Atlantis a lot. And Edgar Cayce said that there were Atlanteans who survived the destruction of the continent, although Cayce doesn't call it a continent. Cayce said that it was a massive, basically, it was a huge maritime culture that traded all over the world. And it was in all the islands of the Caribbean, which were much larger in 10, 12, 20, 50, 100,000 BC. And also they were along the continental shelf of Florida and in the Yucatan and so on. But he calls the Atlanteans the red race. And Cayce said the purest Atlanteans that survive today are the Iroquois tribe. So we did this for 10 years. We searched all over. We got our own boat. We got our own side scan sonar. We got 3 different side scan sonars. We got lots of underwater video equipment. We did many aerial surveys. We looked at sites all over the place, found lots and lots of weird stone formations. We found we found 31 crashed planes, by the way, underwater, including several that are on the Bermuda Triangle list. And some of the last things we found were, it's called Brown's Ruins, which not after you, Bob, but they are called Brown's Ruins. They are about 30 miles south of Bimini. It's very clearly a structure that looks like it was knocked over, and it is polished schist. And schist is exactly what the Oracle of Delphi was made out of in Greece. We had the schist geologically tested at 2 independent labs and 1 university lab. And all 3 concluded the same thing. The schist came from one of 2 places. It either came from Norway or Greece. That's what they told us, Norway or Greece. And that's where we ended. The Bahamas in 2012 and 13 changed their laws and their rules for archaeological permits. We were working under an archaeological permit, but others were doing geological and archaeological permits, and they were doing things that they didn't like. And it didn't have anything to do with Atlantis. It had to do with people that they had given permits to look for Spanish galleons. And they realized that their permits were too loose. So they changed the permitting rules, and we just decided we're not going to do it anymore. We're not going back for that. We have gone under film permits, and film permits are much more restrictive. So we found loads of stone formations, lots of plains. There is a line that is 5 miles off of Bimini, a triple line of square and rectangular stone structures on the bottom at 300 at the 300-foot depth. And about the 310 to 320 foot depth, you can see the 10,000 BC shoreline, which was found by Florida State University. You can literally see that shoreline, and it's on their maps. And right in slightly higher land, about 15 feet above it, are three lines of approximately 75 structures that are all square and rectangular. They're made of stone.
Mm.
And the interior of them, the exterior of them have pretty much straight walls, but they're covered in coral. The inside of them is filled with sand. Almost all of them are filled with sand. And then there's some stuff growing out of the top because the sand allows it to grow. And that's one of the last things that we did also. That was initially found by archaeologist Bill Donato back in 2006. My wife and I dove it in 2008 with the History Channel. And you can't, but the Bahamas do not allow any work through coral. So that was stuck. We just simply couldn't do anything else with it. That's where that research lies. But we did. We took 25 trips to the Bahamas over 10 years.
Oh my God.
That doesn't. They were all week long. Some of them were 10 days. Some of them were also from the air. We did these massive aerial surveys looking for spots. And that's how we found most of the crashed planes, finding spots. We also found 3 or 4 sunken ships and lots of other areas with things on the bottom. So it's a strange area. It's a very strange area. So that's kind of a summary of what we did in the Bahamas. And I wrote it up as we did it. We issued, every time we came back, I'd issue reports. And those can be found on the website, apmagazine.info. But you got to do a search on it, do a search for Bahamas, because that's been around a long time.
But, you know, when you talk about Atlantis, where were it supposed to be then?
Well, I believe that the Atlantis story is what's left of this lost civilization or lost maritime culture that existed and was pretty much destroyed around 10,000 BC. The Younger Dryas event is what pretty much destroyed it. It caused tsunamis and so on. And then, of course, the oceans rose pretty quickly. And we know here in America, if you take archaeological research, what's happened now is that they have found on the continental shelf, particularly in the Gulf of Mexico and on the Atlantic side of Florida. You look at Florida and you look at Alabama, its areas that are along the Gulf of Mexico, and Louisiana, you have this continental shelf that goes out, in some cases, 100 or 200 miles. And it was all above water in 10,000 BC, all of it. And so they found now, it's not quite 100, but loads of sites on that continental shelf. They're underwater. They're very difficult to study. But we've always known there was a culture, a shell mound culture, and shell rings, which are very strange. Giant rings of shell mounds, some of which are 20, 30 feet high. I mean, a ring. And they're made mainly of shell. Some of them have some sand mixed in with it. They have geometric formations off of them. Sometimes there are large mounds. Some of them are made in the shape of animals, and they sometimes lived on top of those, and they lived inside the shells. The old idea is, it was ritual feasting. They'd go there and they'd all cook, shellfish, and they'd eat it and then just throw their shells in the pile. That is the old archaeological way they used to explain them, and call them midden mounds and trash mounds. And that's not true. That's actually a derogatory term now to a lot of people in archaeology. So they know that they made those probably long before any of the ones we found on land. And there are probably I think there's 30 that are left in South Carolina alone. Georgia has 10 or 12, 34. There's probably about 70 or 75 of these geometric shell rings that still exist along the Atlantic coast of the United States and the Gulf of Mexico or Gulf of America coast, which either one you want to call it, that are underwater. And then there's loads of them that are underwater that have not been looked at yet. And they may date really as far back as 20 some thousand BC, but we don't know. We have no idea, but they're clearly there. So there was an old culture. And I think that was part of the maritime culture. The Bahamas at the time were much larger. Most of it was one giant island in the Bahamas.
Mm.
And Casey, I like Casey's idea of it, and that it was all of these islands. I mean, people always talk about Atlantis as a tiny little circular island. That's not true. Even Plato said it was roughly 350 miles long and 240 miles wide. That's not a little circular island. He said the center city was on the south side center of that island, and it had a large mountain above it, a mountain range. And there is one place in the Atlantic and the Caribbean that fits that perfectly, and that's Cuba. And that's Andrew Collins' idea. And there is a spot there on the south side of the mountain range where there's a big circular formation that looks like it has multi rings. It's underwater now, but you can see it on satellite images. That looks just like it. We've been trying to get there since about 2007, but we're Americans. We can't go to Cuba and do this. We can't do it. And of course now, and we've tried, we've interfaced with Cuba and with various filming groups and organizations, and it's not something that we've been able to do. But I'm ready to go check out that area of Cuba. So that's what I think Atlantis was. It was a large maritime culture where Plato got bits and pieces of it. And I mean, I know where Plato got it, but wherever the original story came from, I don't know. But I think it has some basis on fact. And I'm a believer in Carl Jung. Carl Jung said all myths have a basis in reality.
Sounds
I will
good.
answer that. Let me answer that other question quick that I see. Are Native Americans earthworks and mounds and earthworks similar to the types in UK? In my opinion, the answer is yes. There is a real similarity. They are also found in Sweden. They're found in Ukraine. They're found in Russia. They're found all over there. The chambers inside the ones at UK are very similar to the chambers found in the ones in the United States. So the answer is yes. They are so similar that you pretty much say they're the same.
And the other question was, are any of these sites on ley lines?
Well, I'm sure they are. The problem is there's probably 100,000 mounds in the United States. How many sites there are? There's probably 50,000, 40,000 Native American sites. So they're everywhere. And some of in the United States, and some of them, I am certain, are on what would be called ley lines. We have done some testing of that in the Southwest in particular. There's a video on Twitter on my X page somewhere on it that shows me at one of those sites. Actually, the first time I've ever used dowsing rods at one of these sites.
I've got about 7 minutes left. What do you hope readers ultimately take away from these Denisovans' origins?
I'm sorry, say that again.
What do you hope readers ultimately take away from the Denisovans'
from that
origins?
book? Yeah, that here's the book. Put it up here. There's Denisovan Origins. I hope what they take away is that the story of history, of our ancient history, we don't really know. And whatever I'm telling you is probably not much worse than not any better nor any worse than what an archaeologist will tell you, and experts in ancient history. And when I say ancient history, I'm talking about 10,000 BC and before. It remains a great mystery what went on there. And there were people that came out of that time who we know about because their DNA has been passed along. And the only remnants that we have of them sometimes are their bones or the stone tools they made. That's about it. So, anybody, including archaeologists, that's giving you a complete history of that ancient world, the pre 10,000 BC world, it's a type of conjecture, but it's based mainly upon bones and it's based upon whatever their stone tools were. And it could go back in time. See, I believe that there's good evidence that the Americas were visited and inhabited at least by 133,000 BC,
Oh,
if
God.
not well before. There's very good evidence of the 130,000 BC. There's also evidence of 250,000 BC and 400,000 BC. They wouldn't be modern humans, they would be something else. So I think it's just what we're saying about it is probably no worse than the conjecture that archaeologists say about it.
What's the next big question in the field that researchers should be asking?
Well, I think we really need to look at underwater sites. That though is for the specialists. It's very costly. You have to have specialized training. But otherwise, I think the whole idea of the Younger Dryas that needs to be settled. What exactly caused the rise in sea levels? Was there a catastrophic event? I think there was. I think there's good evidence of it, but there is no real consensus in science of it. I also think that archaeologists really need to take a good look at the genetics between the Clovis culture, whatever genetics they can find with that, including the Denisovan DNA that they might be able to find, and go back and look at the Solutrean culture and see if those two do, in fact, link together. But then so many archaeologists have said it's nonsense and is not true and can't be true. Those aren't the ones to do it. It has to be somebody that's more neutral that really wants to know. And that's what I hope. I hope there's some archaeologists that come along that have the ability to do this and they just want to know. They don't want to prove a point. They just want to know. It's like when my wife and I went to look at those formations in the Bahamas that were underwater, that were true mysteries, the E and the triple ring of standing stones. That was what was written. I wanted to know.
Of course
And
you do.
so when we found out it was natural, we said that in the articles. And yes, there were some people upset at us saying, "How this has been, they've always said this is standing stones. How can you say it's natural?" And because we were standing at it, I stood in the water next to it. I felt them. We filmed it. The whole thing. We know what they are. It's weird, I admit, but it's a natural formation. And I wish somebody that had that attitude in archaeology would do the same with everything Graham Hancock says, everything Andrew says, and the point that I'm making. I hope there's
I bet
somebody.
it was hard to get permits for it.
They can get permits a heck of a lot easier than we can. Although I worked with archaeologists that did have permits, we worked under an archaeological permit, and I'm very thankful for that.
Some of them places like that, can the government stop you from doing things like that as well?
Yes, that's basically what the Bahamas did with their changing in their laws. They made it very costly. They made you zero in to only looking in one area at a time, one very small area. And we were searching vast areas. Took a lot of time. I mean, we took an 18-hour, 7 knots. Is how fast we were going, 7 knots. 18 hours to go from Bimini all the way to southern Andros, not far from Cuba, actually, although we weren't in Cuban water space at the time. And that takes a lot of time, but you can't do that anymore. Not for exploring. You can't do that. It's not legal. You have to get permits that specify an area and exactly what it is you're going to do.
You think that's a government cover-up then?
I think it's about money. I think it's about money. I'm not sure it's a cover up. The Bahamas they love the idea of it being Atlantis.
Oh
Uh,
God, yeah, they
but
would do for
yeah,
tourism.
yeah, the permits are about money. That's what they're about.
Money, money, money. So
Well,
what?
yeah, sorry.
So what's next for you then, Greg?
Well, I'm waiting on the third edition of the Mountain Encyclopedia to come out, and in 10 days, my wife and I take a tour group. I hope it's the last tour I ever do as tour guides. We're going to southwest of America to go to Chaco Canyon, Hovenweep, ancestral Puebloan or Anasazi sites. We're doing that in about 12 days from now. And then I've got another book in the works, and then I'm still busy professionally too. So that's what's in the works. Just staying busy as long as I can.
One last question here from Steph. What if the megalithic stones are placed around the Earth on energy points,
I
like
have,
human acupuncture, making our
okay.
Earth's energy flow?
I am aware of that idea. What I will tell you was this, and I have written about it. I believe that Shaman assisted in the layout of the geometric earthworks. There are thousands of those in the United States. Mound formations. There are stone formations that are associated with these, with some mounds. And I believe that a lot of these sites were, in fact, laid out to channel the movements of people through different I want to call it subtle energies, but it's electromagnetic, different subtle electromagnetic changes to produce certain mental effects. I am a very big believer in that, but I will say this too, not everyone can sense those subtle energies. And back in 1994, in a book that I wrote, I said that I believed that the difference between those who could sense these electromagnetic fields and those who cannot sense them is the amount of a mineral known as magnetite, specifically in the brain and specifically in the hippocampus of the brain, which magnetite was not discovered in the human brain until 1990. And it's what carrier pigeons used to have in their brain that would align itself to the Earth's magnetic fields so
Yeah,
that they could navigate. So, some people, very few people actually, are electromagnetically sensitive. There is a medical disorder called electromagnetic sensitivity. It's very real. Some people can sense when there's a battery behind their head. It doesn't have to touch their head. It's just a battery behind their head. That's one way that it's diagnosed. But I believe most shaman actually were not created, they were born that way. It's hereditary. And I believe the amount of magnetite in the brain is probably hereditary in nature, and it has to do with the area that you're born in and the types of foods that are ingested, the minerals that are in the soil that produce your food, and so on. But shaman are born that way; they're just different. And I think that is it. I think everything that's mystical like this or strange, I think it
yeah,
all basically has some sort of scientific explanation that we don't know. And subtle energies are one of those. So, yes, they had energy points. Sometimes stones were used. For this person, if they know about Serpent Mound, everybody sees Serpent Mound in Ohio as being an earthen mound. But what you probably don't know is that if you remove the soil, what you're going to see is a large line of stones, not a single line of stones, but various stones that are lying right on the bottom surface. And those stones were placed first, and then the long mound was put on over those stones after the stones were placed.
very good. Yeah, great question that was as well.
Yeah.
Well, we've just about run out of time. Where can people find you and where can they get your books?
Well, the books are available through Amazon, almost anywhere. The Denisovan origins and origins of the gods are available everywhere. And the best way to find me is to Google my name. Don't put in Greg Little, put in Gregory, put my middle initial, which is the letter L for
Oh,
Lee, Gregory L. Little. You can contact me through Twitter or X. I'm also on Facebook, but Twitter is really the very best way. I do answer almost every question that people will ask on Twitter or X, and that's where I post almost everything now. And as these books come out and as we do research and we visit places, that's the place where I post the most on X. Easy to find. Put my name in, you'll find me easily.
yeah. Oh, God, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you again for coming on the show after all them years.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Bob.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure. Always a pleasure to talk to you. And I'm glad you have that list of questions. It keeps me from zipping out, and because I can talk the whole time, as I'm
Yeah,
sure you know. But I appreciate the invitation very much.
thank you.
And thank you to the listeners. You take care.
Yes. And thank you to everybody in the chat room as well for their questions as well. My guest on Friday is Mike Ricksecker. He's been on before, but that's quite a few years ago as well. So it's nice to get him back on again. So that's Friday, the 6th of March. And so don't miss out. It's same time as usual, 2 o'clock Eastern, 11 o'clock Pacific, and 7 o'clock in the UK. I'd like to say thank you again. Good night and God bless. Take care. Bye for now.